Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we're talking one of my favorite categories. We're talking early fall jerkbait fishing. The jerkbait is one of the most enjoyable ways to target bass. You get to play this cat and mouse game with the fish, and this time of year, as water temps begin cooling back down, bass get more and more aggressive. They get more oriented towards bait fish, more interested in chasing those bait fish, and the jerkbait is at the height as we head into fall. This is the peak of that bite where fish are most willing to chase after the bait. And you do that stop and start, and that fish is back there chasing that bait, and boom, they eat it. It is so much fun. If you don't jerkbait, if you haven't experienced this, I mean, you really are missing out on one of the most exciting ways to fish. This ranks, I mean, right below topwater in terms of excitement, where you're playing that cat and mouse game. If it's clear water, you'll see a fish come out and get behind that bait. You twitch it and they move. You twitch again, they move again. Twitch, 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 here they come, and then boom, they eat that thing. It's awesome. Now, early fall, as these fish are getting more aggressive, my bait selection is actually really simple. I've got a handful of baits here, of course, because I do like to fine tune it. But bait selection is really easy, and how I fish a jerkbait is even easier. I want to be really aggressive with them. We'll get to that when we talk rods. But as far as baits go, what I'm looking for is baits with a lot of flash, a lot of commotion, baits that I can move quickly and get those fish to really hunt down and ambush or attack. It's fascinating when we've watched underwater footage through the years, how these fish will react to those baits. They hunt them, that bait moves, they come up to it. It moves again, they reposition. Bass like to eat their prey head first if they have the opportunity. So a lot of times they'll track that jerkbait waiting for it to turn. And then as soon as it turns and it pauses, that's their moment. Boom! They lash out on that thing. So choosing the right bait is really simple. You want a bait that has a lot of flash and that you can work quickly. Frankly, early fall is probably when more jerkbaits work than any other time of year. As we get into the heart of winter, you really need a dialed in bait. We spend a lot of time throwing a Vision 110 or a 110 plus one in the heart of winter. This time of year, you can get away with some other baits, although we still throw that 110 a lot. Let's jump right into the baits. Let's start there. Then I want to talk a little bit about color theory, okay? Because color is everything with a jerkbait. I'm gonna show you very quickly how you can go from doing okay to having an amazing time on the water just by shifting color. First, the baits. If I was just going to pick, that standard, hey, I need a jerkbait, which one should I throw? I'm going one of these two directions. This is the Megabass Vision 110. That is the staple. That is the standard that every other jerkbait is judged by. The other one that I'm going to pick up is that one right there, the Shimano World Minnow. These two baits are incredible. They're very different, but the way they get fish to react is remarkable. So if I'm just reaching for one, it's one of these two. If I'm leaning more towards smallmouth or spotted bass or more towards finesse, I'm leaning more towards the 110. If I'm leaning more towards largemouth, more towards southern style fishing, maybe a little heavier line, more aggressive, I'm leaning more towards the World Minnow. But with that said, you could pick up either one of these, go anywhere, and you're on that jerkbait bite. Both of these are excellent baits. They're different, but both of them just crush. So if I could only have one, it would be one of those, okay? From there, I adapt just a little bit. If I need to go to deeper water, there's one bait that rises above for me, and that's that Vision 110, but in the +1, the deeper diving version. Now, there are some other great options. The Shimano comes in the World Diver. I've crushed them on that bait, but today I really want to simplify this for you. So I'm just going to give you a few baits. That 110 +1 is deadly if you want to get just a little bit deeper. This bait tends to sit in the water relatively flat. It's got a little bit of a tip to it. The 110 sits a little bit steeper, bigger bill, deeper dive, and it'll just catch those fish that the 110 can't reach. The only other thing I really pay attention to is if I need to go smaller. How do I know? That's important. How do you know what size bait you should throw? Well, if you can get away with it, throw that full size bait. Throw the 110 or the World Minnow. The reason why, they've got bigger hooks on them. They cast farther, right? There's more mass to them. They'll throw farther. They've got bigger hooks, and that equals more forgiving. If you hook a fish on a bigger hook than a smaller hook, your odds of getting them in the boat are better, especially if your tackle's not dialed. The other way you know, much more scientifically than that, is by paying attention to what size minnows are in your lake. If you catch bass and they spit up a minnow, take a look at it. Look how big it is. If you see fish this time of year chasing bait fish, pay attention to how big they are and do your best to be similar to that size. So I've got that standard size, whether that's shallow or deep with the +1. And then from there we go smaller, because in the fall, a ton of fisheries have these downsized bait fish in them. Shad spawned back in April, May, and those shad are coming up, but they're not full size. You're gonna have a lot of lakes in this country that have little like 1 to 3 inch, whether that's shad, whether that's just little different kinds of minnows, whether that's juvenile bluegill or juvenile crappie. There are these downsized bait fish in the fall. Recognizing that and throwing appropriately sized baits makes a huge difference. So 2 more for you. This is Shimano's Zumverno, which is essentially, it is not exactly a downsized World Minnow. They are different baits, but they are very, very similar. Now, one thing I haven't even gotten to is this flash boost, and it's inside both of these baits. And that is one of the things that makes the Shimano so deadly. When this bait darts and moves, when you stop, I'll stop, it continues to flash and move. And that is secondary action. And I have seen with my own eyes, I am dead convinced that I have caught some giant fish specifically because that was still moving. Because I've had fish shoot up to this thing and stop. And it's right at that moment where 1,000 other times I've watched them decide not to commit, and off they go. And they've sat there and they've looked at it, and then for no reason, I haven't moved it at all, boom, they blast that thing. And I am convinced it's because of that secondary movement continuing to move inside of that bait. So in the smaller category, we've got the Zumverno, and it's got that same thing going on inside it. Just that subtle movement even after the bait stops moving. And then the other one, back to the Megabass Vision series, again, gold standard of jerkbaits. There's a 110 Junior, but specifically this 110 Junior +1. So if you want to go smaller, if you want to go shallower, Zumverno. If you want to go deeper, the 110 Junior +1. There is something about this bait. For me, in the entire Megabass line of jerkbaits, the whole line is the gold standard of jerkbaits. That is the most special bait in the lineup. I don't know why the 110 Junior +1 has the magic. I don't know what it is, but it has it. And it is what gets fish to bite. Sometimes we can see it with a human eye. You look at a bait and you're like, that's got it. Whatever it is, that's got it. Sometimes you can't tell at all, but one bait just continues to crush fish in every situation you put it into. That's the case here. I can't see the difference between this one and some of the others, but it just works over and over. Every situation I put it in, it works. So again, if you want to go shallow, try that Zumverno as we head into fall. If you want to go deeper, that 110 plus 1 junior is the deal. Now, I did mention as we go into fall, as we get into fall, all the way into fall, headed towards winter, jerkbaiting can get better and better and better, but it gets more and more precise. So at some point in the coming weeks, we will do a very in-depth jerkbait video for you. Exact details on line and gear, adapting it to bait casting, adapting it to spinning tackle, a lot more baits and how to use each one effectively. We will do that. But this time of year, I just want to get a jerkbait in your hand. You don't want to be the last guy to the table, right? You want to be there first. You want to be sticking those fish before they start seeing everybody else's jerkbaits. And this handful of baits will really help you shine as you do that. And again, you don't need all of them, right? Do you need a shallow one or a deep one? Do you need a big one or a small one? Grab one. Go fishing. It's that simple. I've got 2 more. And that's because Tim and I, more and more, have gotten hooked by this BFS thing, bait finesse. Now, whether you're a fan of bait finesse or you're a spinning rod guy, does not matter to me. We agree that there are tiny bait fish present in the water in the fall. Bait finesse, or spinning tackle, allows us to go even smaller. So here are 2 very small baits. This one is by Cultiva. This one is in Megabass's new line of BFS specific baits. That's that X80 Junior. So a shallow option and a deeper running option that you can throw on dedicated bait finesse tackle, or you can throw on spinning tackle, but truly matching the size of the bait fish. I've done so much damage the last couple of weeks on these downsized little jerk baits. It's remarkable when the fish are on those little shad, you know, inch and a half shad, going even from that size, going even smaller, is a huge difference in the way those fish respond in a lake where they've been pressured. If you're on a lake where there's not a lot of guys fishing, you almost can do no wrong, because a jerkbait is so deadly effective, it will catch them. But on a place where they're seeing a lot of baits, where these fish are getting hammered, being really specific with size and color is critical. Now, action is also critical. We're going to get to that. I'll show you in just a minute. But let's talk color, because this is the difference maker, okay? If you can only have 1 color of jerkbait to go anywhere, you want a ghost type color. And Megabass, this is matte shad. For each one of these baits in the video description, I'm actually going to do 2 things. I'm going to give you my favorite couple of natural colors, and I'm going to give you my favorite couple of aggressive or bold colors, and I'm about to explain that, okay? So I'll list that, you know, it'll say Megabass Vision 110 with a link to Tackle Warehouse where you can see that exact jerkbait. Then I'll tell you, these are my favorite natural colors, these are my favorite bold colors. Matte shad is definitely #1 in that Megabass line. If you could only have 1 jerkbait to go anywhere, anytime, and see if there is a jerkbait bite, you throw that one right there. It's that simple. However, what I have discovered in my own fishing is that if I stick to those natural colors, I get on a jerkbait bite a lot, but I rarely have one of those just off the charts, out of this world days that you never forget about. I have all of those days on the bright colors, the bold colors, the obnoxious colors. There's something about that where they won't eat them every day, and that's why matte shad or a ghost minnow, something like that, is #1. Because if you just need to know, hey, can I catch a jerkbait fish? Always go natural. Always. Because they are more likely to eat it. But if they're eating that, you try these other colors, okay? If they'll eat one of the bold colors too, they eat them harder, they eat them more aggressively, they eat them more off. They lose their minds over those bright, bold colors. absolutely lose their minds. But again, they don't do it all the time. So always start with natural. But if natural is working, take the time to try bold. Because if that is working, that's when you're going to have one of those days that you will never forget. And then right then and there, you will understand why we're so passionate about a jerkbait. You'll experience one of those days. Here are some examples of what I mean by bright and bold. It doesn't have to be, now a lot of my bright and bold, these are two of my babies right here. See how bright Elegy bone is? Tons of chartreuse on that belly, but it doesn't have to be that bold. Look at this guy. Just a little bit of chartreuse back here. That can be a huge difference maker over just a matte shad. Huge difference maker. And then if that's working, I go all the way to Elegy bone. Full-blown chartreuse. But it doesn't have to be chartreuse. Right here, red head, yellow back. How about white or bone? Just bright and bold. Not necessarily chartreuse, not necessarily obnoxious, just bold. Here's something I want you to think about. In a situation where bass have not been pounded on, okay? Forget a pressured lake. On a place where they are not pressured, bass will travel the farthest for a bright bait because they can see them from farther, okay? Be that bone, white, chartreuse. Bass go the farthest to get to those bold, bright colors. They have more drawing power than natural, subtle colors. However, most of us fish in the real world where fish get their teeth kicked in, right? They get beat on. And as a result, we throw a lot of very natural colors because that's all those fish will respond to. But when you get them fired up, when you get them going crazy, if you can get them going on those bold colors, it is next level. They come farther, they hit them harder, they hit them more often. They just lose their minds. They come unglued for those things. And it may be temporary. It may be a 20-minute bite window where they're willing to fire off on Elegy bone and just crush that thing. And all of a sudden you catch the biggest smallmouth of your life. Or you get them and they're just going and you catch 75 fish on a jerkbait in one day, right? Those days, you just never forget them. So don't be afraid as we head into this time of year where these fish are getting more aggressive. Have a natural bait, but don't be afraid to try those other colors. Now you're finally understanding. For some of you, you're finally understanding. You go to the store and you're like, who throws clown? What is that? This is when you try that color. This is that time. Now let's talk rods. If you've ever watched me talk about a jerkbait, ever, you already know what rod this is. This is the X-Pride 610 medium paired to an Aldebaran with 10-pound fluorocarbon. If I think I'm around big ones, I go to 12-pound fluorocarbon. I keep it that simple. But this is just the baddest jerkbait rod at any price that I've ever found. See, the thing about jerkbaits is that you have to be precise. Getting that bait to move is the difference between catching a ton of fish and catching literally none. And what I mean is that a jerkbait must start and stop in aggressive movements with nothing in between. If you accidentally pull a jerkbait, so it does that and a bass comes up, and then that jerkbait gets pulled a little more and it swims a little, they turn off it. I can't tell you why that is, but we have hours of underwater footage where we've watched this happen. If that bait starts a slow movement before darting, they're not interested anymore. They just let it go. It's those harsh, sharp movements. Move hard, hard stop. Move hard, hard stop. Those are the movements that get bit. Finding a rod that can do that is almost impossible. Almost impossible. That X-Pride 610 medium is the best rod I've ever found to do it, because it's easy to find a rod with a really stiff tip section that can do it, that can snap and come back. But then it's even harder to take that and then find a rod that will bend in the middle and keep those little tiny treble hooks in those fish. That's what's so hard. How do you have a rod that's crisp enough to get the action, but soft enough to keep the fish pinned? This rod is magical for that. Again, X-Pride, Aldebaran, fluorocarbon is my setup. In the video description, I'll link the exact line and everything. But here's the good news. I found another rod I really, really like. This one is by Megabass. P5, this is the 110 stick. It's a shorter rod, it's 6'5", again, paired to an Aldebaran. This, if you haven't seen this line, see that green line? This is that Daiwa hidden fluorocarbon that I've been talking about lately. I've fallen in love with this line this year. And I feel like, and I didn't dream this up, I had somebody tell me to go try this, and then I went and tried it, and I was like, hey, they are right. I feel like I am getting more distance out of my jerkbait on this line than most of the other fluorocarbons that I've tried. There's something about it that gives me tangibly more distance, but it also holds up to abuse really well. So the two lines that I'm using are this Daiwa hidden fluoro and then the Sun line, which is that guy there. And again, I'll link both of these down in the video description for you. This is the Super FC, but just fantastic lines. But going back to this rod, the 110 stick has that same sort of crispness up here, but soft through the mid to be able to absorb. And it's an even smaller rod. This is a 6'5" instead of a 6'10", which has been even more comfortable for throwing some of the smaller jerkbaits. We are always looking. Even when I find what I believe to be the baddest rod there is, I will always continue to look because other things come to market and we've got to know when another winner is out there. Both of those are fantastic. Also with the X-Pride, the Corrado version, Corrado 610 medium rod paired to the Corrado 70 MGL reel, exact same action, weighs a little bit more, but exact same action for less money. So for the guy who's trying to save some funds and not just completely blow the budget on an Aldebaran setup, you can go down to that Corrado 70 MGL and it's equally effective. It's an excellent combo. I'll link that as well. And then last, those tiny little bait finesse baits. I've been throwing those effectively on the Cashin 610 medium light. I don't believe the perfect BFS jerkbait rod has been built yet. The perfect one. But I've been able to do it very effectively all fall. Well, we haven't had all fall yet, but end of summer till now, I've been doing it really effectively on this rod by using braid to leader. And that braid is helping me get that crisp movement out of the bait. If I can get away with fluorocarbon, I prefer it, but I'm able to do it effectively here with braid, throwing these tiny little baits, and it's working great. So again, in the video description, I'll link all this stuff, but guys, there will be a more in-depth video. Believe it or not, this was the simple version. Very simple version. We go down the rabbit hole on this topic because jerkbait fishing is special. But today I really wanted to just get you guys going. I don't want you being the last one to the table, the last guy to find out about the bite. You should be out there sticking these fish first. The baits are simple, colors are simple. Get a natural one. If you want to try the bold thing, get a bold one. Get a good jerkbait rod and you're set. And the cool thing about jerkbait rods is you can do so many other things with these rods. They double as great topwater rods. I throw a lot of things on a 610 medium. Frankly, I throw a lot of topwater on them, smaller Senkos on them. You can even throw tiny jigs, although I have another rod that I prefer for that. But you could throw tiny jigs, you could throw shaky heads. There's a lot of things you can do with these rods. So it's not like you're buying a jerkbait rod and nothing else. You know, like a frog rod is usually dedicated. Swimbait rod is dedicated. A flipping stick is dedicated. But this is a rod where you can own the best jerkbait rod and a rod that does 10 other things really well. So it's getting used year round. It's not just a one-trick pony in your lineup. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. Again, I'll link everything in the video description for you. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.